forces moved up, consolidating and advancing further, working as one. After a hard day's fighting, the 8th Army had made a salient in the north 6 miles wide and to a depth 4 miles beyond the first enemy minefields. Next day, attacks were made in the center and south, the attacks that Rommell had been expecting and which he thought were the real thing, but they were merely diversions. In fact, our main attack was to be in the north. The 8th Army's crowbar had been driven in and was being levered this way and that. In our salient, the Australians were attacking again and secured a 3-mile front running west-northwest. Rommell counterattacked repeatedly during these days, both on the ground and in the air. The Air Force was doing a magnificent job. For the Luftwaffe, the skies became a place of deadly peril, and the machines that escaped us there were destroyed on the ground. On the 4th day of the battle, Kidney Ridge was assaulted by troops of the 7th Armored Division, riflemen, light tanks, and armored cars. wedge was taken. In the meantime, the Australians, backed by British tanks, were exploiting their former northward thrust and driving a wedge still further into the German forces near the sea. Rommell was now fighting back with little pause and with increasing desperation. Days' bitter work cut off large numbers of Rommell's infantry, some of whom for the time being fought on isolated. Casualties suffered were heavy on both sides, but large groups of prisoners were in our hands. While the battle in the north was raging, Rommell had been forced to act. We had imposed our will on him. He moved 2 Panzer divisions, the 21st and Ariete, from the south to just below our salient. The Air Force began the task of preventing them from concentrating. General Montgomery now gathered his entire armor, including his division from the south, ready for the crowbar's final thrust. The first phase was finished. On November the 1st, the 9th day of battle, the 8th Army advanced on its entire front of 40 miles. But the blow we meant to be mortal was struck at the head of the bulge. Was the breakthrough. Within 2 hours, our light tanks were 40 miles behind Rommell's lines, destroying his transport. The result was consternation and chaos. The moment that Alexander and Montgomery had been waiting for had come. The entire weight of their armor was in readiness, and like a fleet of ironclads, it sailed through the gap. Its purpose was simple: to destroy Rommell's armor. Throughout this day, November the 3rd, the heaviest armored battle of the campaign had been waged. Fighting went on along the whole front, but it was centered on Aqqaqir, where a tank battle of the bitterest kind reached hour by hour a deeper and more bloody intensity. 3/4 of the Axis tanks were burning or otherwise wrecked. As the day faded, the battle still continued. At Aqqaqir, we captured the dominating ridge. Our air force had almost annihilated the Luftwaffe, and now our entire strength pounded an enemy beginning to crack.
This is the BBC Home and Forces programme. This is Bruce Belfrage. Here's some excellent news which has come during the past hour in the form of a communique from GHQ Cairo. It says, the Axis forces in the Western Desert, after 12 days and nights of ceaseless attacks by our land and air forces, are now in full retreat.
That'll show 'em, and plenty more where that came from.
The Afrika Korps, utterly broken and possessed with no thought but flight, was hotly pursued. But the 8th Army was not only the thunder behind, but the lightning ahead. From hull-down positions on the road of escape, our guns and tanks knocked out on the first day of retreat over 50 of Rommell's remaining Panzers without loss. He had already left 500 tanks behind him on the battlefield. We captured over 1,000 pieces of artillery. Up to 1,000 aircraft, from troop carriers to fighters, were wreckage on the ground. Italians in the south, abandoned by Rommell with neither food nor water, were swept up by us to the tune of 5 divisions. In the north, we took thousands of Germans. Among them were von Thoma, commander of the Afrika Korps, Burckhardt, leader of the German parachutists, and 8 Italian generals. We buried 20,000 enemy dead, but in rendering our own dead the same final duty, great care had to be used. For the Germans, on several occasions, had attached booby traps to our men's bodies. Pursuit was remorseless. Every enemy column, on the coast road or in the desert, sometimes jammed head to tail, was bombed, blasted and machine-gunned. They tasted what they'd administered in France and Poland. Forces on the ground had crushed Rommell's flimsy rearguard and were sweeping on. After 2 days' pursuit, rain fell, and the chase was much impeded. Stretches of road turned to shallow streams, Aircraft landing grounds were waterlogged. Despite the rains, however, on the fourth day we had taken, after a brief fight, Mirza Matruh, the first of the newly captured ports the Navy used to bring up supplies. The first heavily mined roads were encountered at Hellfire Pass, where the twisting road rises 700 feet. From then onwards to Benghazi, 450 miles further west, every pass had been blown by the enemy, and every mile of road had to be examined and cleared of mines and obstructions. The engineers worked night and day. To Salum, the Navy brought 1.5 million gallons of water and other vital supplies. By the 8th day, the enemy had been cleared out of Egypt. Tobruk, whose name is written deep in our Middle East campaigns, Tobruk, which we held as a fortress behind the enemy lines for 9 months and which had already changed hands twice, was ours once more. The date was November the 13th. In Cyrene, the 8th Army passed from desert to a green countryside, which its Italian colonists had abandoned, and it was no more than a week between our taking Tobruk and entering Benghazi. At Benghazi we paused to replenish our supplies. The harbour, bombed by us for over 2 years, so regularly that the pilots called it doing the mail run, was now littered with sunken ships. Cranes, installations, and most of the quays were demolished. Yet the Navy and engineers worked to such good purpose that before long our ships were unloading. By sea and land, we were soon bringing up 3 million gallons of petrol a week and 8,000 tons of ammunition. While we had been building up our strength, Rommell had been digging in at El Agheila. But after remaining 3 weeks preparing to fight, he changed his mind and withdrew as soon as he felt the full weight of our attack. His indecision achieved nothing except to intensify our new onslaught. From El Agheila to Tripoli is 530 miles. It took the 8th Army 41 days to accomplish it. During that time, they fought several actions with Rommell's rearguards, putting down on one occasion a barrage rivaling that of El Alamein. But though we were delayed, our onward sweep was never in doubt. Just before the last stage began, General Montgomery said in an order of the day, "Nothing has stopped us since the Battle of Egypt began. Nothing will stop us now." And nothing did. 8 days later, we were fighting on the outskirts of Tripoli itself. The surrender of Tripoli by the governor of Libya and the mayor of the city extinguished the Italian overseas empire. Country by country, the British Army had conquered it. Abyssinia, Eritrea, Italian Somaliland, Libya, Tripolitania. Not a single town now remained to them. 20 days, the 8th Army had advanced close on 1,400 miles, a feat unparalleled in military history. Throughout the battle and advance, for every casualty suffered, it had inflicted 5 on the enemy. In the words of Mr. Churchill,
"You have altered the face of the war in a most remarkable way. What it has meant in the skill and organization of movement and maneuver, what it has meant in the tireless endurance and self-denial of the troops, and in the fearless leadership displayed in action, can be appreciated only by those who are actually on the spot. But I must tell you that the fame of the Desert Army has spread throughout the world.